Good evening. The opinions and statements voiced by our guests do not necessarily reflect the opinions of this network. Enjoy the shows.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, Birmingham, Alabama.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army. Army officers say the missile, found sometime last week, has been inspected at Roswell, New Mexico, and sent to Wright Field, Ohio, for further inspection.
Now, historic films made in the spring of 1948 and just released show Eniwetok preparing for heavily guarded and still largely secret tests of new atomic weapons. The test's purpose is to measure atomic effects on thousands of different materials, 30,000 tons of them, not, as at Bikini, to prove military effectiveness.
San Francisco police say that 9 persons have been arrested in a narcotics raid on the headquarters of the Grateful Dead, a widely popular singing group. 2 members of the group, Rod McKernan and Robert Weir, and their business manager, Danny Rifkin, have been booked on suspicion of possessing narcotics.
3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11. Tower cleared.
Here we got a roll program. Neil Armstrong reporting the roll and pitch program, which puts Apollo 11 on a proper heading.
I'm going to step off the limb now. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Well, strange lights are causing a viral buzz on YouTube. Could we have caught extraterrestrial activity on a recent newscast? Brandon Arroyo investigates.
As the newscast ended, the controversy began back on September 26th. What is that light shining in the back of the dark night sky?
With coverage reaching all the way back to 1948, for over 70 years, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Now, Fate Magazine Radio is carrying on that tradition of setting the standard in paranormal talk radio as we report and discuss some of the most mysterious and perplexing phenomena imaginable in this strange world of ours. Now, here is your host of Fate Magazine Radio, Kat Hobson.
Good evening. Welcome to Fate Mag Radio, the online voice of Fate Magazine here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. I am so pleased that you are here because we have got a fantastic show. I know, I think they're all fantastic because they are, but I really enjoy chatting with tonight's guest. He's brilliant. But before we get there, I do want to give a couple of shout outs because I have, like all of you, friends who are working on the front lines in the hospitals, all of the medical care facilities, but I'm going to go tonight with someone who is the hospital nurse. She is a brilliant nurse. She has several specialties that she has gone for additional training on, and her orthopedic nursing training finished right as I fractured my knee. So she was a great help and comfort to me as I came through that because she knew exactly what it was and I'd never heard of it. Neither have most people. So she saved my sanity and kept me calm when strange things started happening to it. So I am going to give a shout out to one of my very favorite nurses, Terry Chastain. And Terry, I know how hard you're working, and I love you. And thank you for being the kind of woman that you are. For the record, she is a jam-up paranormal investigator, too. Just putting that out there. Now, tonight's guest is Tim Woolworth. And if you probably have heard him on with me before. He's been with me here, and he's been with me on Paranormal Experienced. He is probably the best authority on electronic voice phenomenon, and as well as ITC. He is a great researcher. He has so many types of equipment designed for this that he is very well trained on probably anything that you're going to come across. I know that I go and look at his pages when I have something that is throwing me for a loop, and it made me better at what I do because I am getting pretty decent, really, with my EVP work. So I owe that to him too. But he's also a lecturer. He is an author. He is working on a project that we might just get to tonight. And I am just so glad to welcome Tim Woolworth to Fate Mag Radio. Hey, Tim.
Hey, Kat. How's it going?
So far, so good. So far, so good. I am so glad you're here. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a real pleasure to be back. As you know, I have been a Fate Magazine fan forever, and obviously a fan of Fate Magazine Radio. So as I told you the first time I was on, it's kind of like a childhood dream come full circle. I grew up with a subscription to Fate Magazine. We kept it in the house, and I read it diligently every month from must be 10 years old on, and yeah, I am just absolutely thrilled to be here, and thank you for inviting me.
Well, I feel like that when I host it. Okay, I've always loved Fate, so I'm glad that you feel like that. And I also got tickled because when you posted about being on, your friend was like, "It was so hard to find, but I got it every time I saw it." So I thought that was nice, and I'm going to let people know I have giveaway copies of the recent editions, and you can actually get the archives on fatemag.com. Our editor, Phyllis, is brilliant. I had a guest on my show. I think I told you this, Tim, but it was so funny. Cheryl Costa, she had written a story and submitted it to Fate and had no idea, never knew that it had been published. So during the course of my show with her, she was discussing this story because she was excited to have a connection to Fate as well. And she was like, and I just never heard back. And so I thought, well, that's a great story. I'm sure they would have published that. There must have been something going on. So a couple of days later, I was talking to Phyllis, and she said, well, we did publish that story. Get me her snail mail. And she sent her 2 copies of the edition that she had been published in. So I just thought, wow, A, it's very cool that she did that. But B, I can't believe that she remembered from several years ago, probably 20 years ago, that this had been written in Fate. So,
yeah, Cheryl is one of those treasures out there. We spoke at the same UFO conference back in 2019, and I got to know her pretty well. She is a resource that is unlike anything else in the field of ufology.
Yes. I did not know that Phyllis had interviewed Zechariah Sitchin. I had no idea until she had posted the interview. And I was like, I did not know you did this. How cool is that? So she's amazing. She really is amazing. I'm so fortunate to count her a friend. And to be able to do this is just even better. I'm so ready to get back out on the road. and start promoting it the way that it should be promoted and do the things that, that I do best. I like people. And to be able to share something like this with them is just way too cool.
No doubt. It's an enviable position, and I hope it suits you well for decades to come.
Thank you. Well, I am so interested. Did your family actually subscribe to Fate?
They did. And it's kind of embarrassing, but our subscription for Fate, it was what we kept in the bathroom for reading material.
Well, absolutely. My whole family has done their best research in that room. We used to call it the reading room.
Yeah, I owe a lot to my mother and my stepdad, because they got me. Well, they didn't directly get me into the field, but they had an interest in reading about these topics. So, as a young kid, I was reading, Charles Berlitz on the Bermuda Triangle and Jacques Vallée's Dimensions and all of these fun books, and I started to just absorb it from an early age. And that's what led to the Fate magazine subscription. So, yeah, some of those tales of Spring-Heeled Jack and the UFO flap in Florida, just all that fun stuff while it was happening and being covered, and Sarah Estep writing about EVP. These are all things that just stuck with me from a very early age.
I have actually been surprised since I have been doing this show. It will be 3 years this summer. I am just always amazed that I am able to talk to people. And it's funny because almost without fail, especially in the cryptids community, as much as ufology, that the majority of my guests have been published in Fate, and I never knew it when I introduced them to my audience. And so they were like, oh, yeah, well, I wrote for Fate. And I was just like, get out of town. It happens all the time.
Well, it sounds like you should send them an article.
Well, Phyllis is like, you should send in an article. I haven't yet because I don't want to take the place of another author that would, be doing that. I get to share my stories here sometimes. So, but it's really a neat thing. I'm so glad you've enjoyed it for so long.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the breadth of topics that Fate covers is just astounding. I mean, anything that is part of paranormal study, you're going to find in there.
Pretty amazing, right?
Absolutely.
I find that because, I'm an investigator. I am learning how to be a safer ufologist as far as my research, and when I see something or hear that something's happening, I don't just run off half-cocked anymore. But, especially with my paranormal investigating, it's helped me even there. And I don't really have any interest in being a snack for any kind of monster. So I don't do a lot of cryptids research. I have, by accident, had experiences, but, not going out looking. I have a lot of friends that do, though.
Yeah, going out and actively searching for cryptids is something I haven't done as of yet. And I don't think it's on the repertoire because I just have too many other things that I've got my hands into that, frankly, I don't have the time to take on a whole extra genre of paranormal studies. It's just, I can't do it. There's too many people who get out there where they're camping for weeks and they're trudging through swamps and bogs and they're documenting thing. And they're the best. And I hope they continue doing what they do.
Well, they are good at it. I mean, that's why they do it. But I live in the South. Everything that we have in our swamps and bogs can kill you. And, I don't want that. But probably if I were up north or something, it would be a little different. But I do know one of my former guests is actually part of the Olympic project. She's a female whose husband built her a place to sleep on top of her vehicle. And she is up in the wilds of the Olympic Mountains for months at a time alone.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
She is fierce. And for anybody that wants to find out about her, her name is Shelley Montana Covington. Yes. So she is really kind of neat. But I want to talk about you because you just did a class, an online class. I thought that was a fantastic program, by the way. And I actually met Beth Deering at Scarefest 2 or 3 years ago. The first year I went, she was there too, but the next year I went, everybody thought it was her first year, and I'm like, no, she was here. She's traveled this far twice. You know, you need to give her some creds. But she is an interesting person.
Oh, absolutely. And yeah, I mean, traveling from Australia to Kentucky, that is quite a journey just for a conference, but a little shorter now that she's in the UK.
Yes. And, you know, I really like her. So I like that she's received well too. So what do you think, what did you think of doing that online conference?
I did a couple this year, and it was completely different. Beth's, she did one called the Paranormal Investigator Conference, which was in May, and I forget all who was part of it. The only ones I remember off the top of my head were the Kling brothers.
Yes.
It was I think a two-day event, and it was we had a couple technical snafus, but I think it worked out great because like a standard conference at the end of your lecture, people sometimes are afraid to raise their hands and ask a question, but behind a keyboard, they can type in their questions all the time. And it was much more responsive that way. And I found that with all the online conferences I've done this year. And I'm really hoping that we can get back to regular conferences next year. My first one is scheduled at the end of February, and it's looking pretty rough right now, but we'll see what happens.
Where is that going to be?
Oh, that one is in Indiana. It's an event for Robin Terry and benefit the Lost Limbs Foundation. It's going to be a very good event. There's a lot of people slated to speak. It's going to be a multi-day event. And the only way he'll hold it is if it can get up to 50% capacity, and then he's going to split locations. So people will be speaking in both different locations, so the crowd will be half the size. Because Robin, he's in the medical field, and he wants to make sure everybody is protected, and I absolutely love that about him.
I love a lot of stuff about him. He is one of the most generous people on the planet as well. But I did not know. So he's going to have. Is it going to be divided between Ashmore and the mansion, or is it all going to be in town?
I'm not sure of the locations off the top of my head. I don't have the info in front of me. We booked it all quite a few months ago. So, but I think he's using his 2 locations, if I'm not mistaken.
Fantastic. Mike Couch and the Lost Limbs Foundation are pretty amazing. I would do a lot to help them as well. So,
absolutely.
Good people. And Robin, obviously.
And right after that, March, I think the first weekend in March, where once again, it's all great people and other great charity Potographs for Pooches.
Tim. Yay.
Yeah, Tim Miley. And we're hoping to hold it in Houghton Lake, and we've got some great people lined up for it. And here's hoping. I mean, I love Potographs. I put my heart and soul into those lectures. I've done so many of them. And as you know, animals are really close to my heart. And I am sincerely hoping that we can get this Potographs off the ground this year so we can surpass that $50,000 mark.
I would love that to happen. I tell you, that is one of my favorite organizations too. I haven't actually started traveling to do speaking, but I'm interested in doing it. And I don't even care if I have to travel. I would be local around here too, but I've just not ever really pushed into that. So I thought that was kind of neat that people that I know are doing such really powerful, needed fundraisers. But we need to take a quick break. So we will be back right after this, and y'all just come back too.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, Birmingham, Alabama.
Oh, come on. I'm Southern, but... Nope. That'll do. Hello. I am Kat Hobson, host of Paranormal Experience here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. I enjoy having guests from all areas of the paranormal, from ghosts to ufology to cryptids and beyond. You'll find some of the best researchers in their fields bringing you some great information. Join me on Wednesday nights from 8 to 10 p. Eastern here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting. The best in paranormal talk radio.
Listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experienced Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Since 1948, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Fate Radio is carrying on that tradition, bringing you the unusual, macabre, strange, and bizarre. Join host Kat Hobson Sunday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
You're listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experience Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
The time is 23 minutes after the hour. Welcome back to Fate Mag Radio. I'm so glad you're here because you get to enjoy my guest for tonight. I'm really excited because it is Tim. And Tim Woolworth is founder of Paranormal Study and ITC Voices. He is brilliant. And thank you for being here. We haven't even gotten into EVPs or ITCs. But, I've learned a lot from you over the last few years since we met in the middle of a hallway. And... Well, you had on a cool shirt. I did not know what that was. I went and found out.
Yeah, the site hadn't even been launched at that point.
Well, it was a good name, and it was what I like to do. The paranormal study, that's what I do when I go out. I'm always trying to learn. I'm looking for answers. And at the time, I was not very patient with my EVP sessions. Sometimes I'm still not. Depends on the situation.
Yeah, patience is absolutely critical. And, basically setting up some protocols for EVP will make your EVP sessions so much more fruitful. Like, for example, a lot of people, they love to bounce around and ask a question and then another question and then another question.
Yeah.
But if you sit back and listen to the tapes that the progenitors of EVP, like Jurgensen and Rodova and Estep, what they would do is they would ask the same question, pause, give enough time for a proper response, ask the same question, and continue. And what they found was you get more answers that were directly related to the question via EVP. If anybody out there has the recordings of like Raymond Cass, you can hear him saying the same question over and over. It's a lost technique. Another lost technique is adding a little background burble during your session. So basically with EVP, how it started, there was an entire history with Jurgensen and how the first accidental EVPs that he recorded were recorded. But what he found was that a little bit of background noise really helped. So right up until the digital revolution, I guess we can say, where digital recorders came out, people would actively put a little bit of background static during their sessions. So we're talking about EVP people. We're talking ITC people. We're not talking casual ghost hunter, because the casual ghost hunter basically didn't exist back then. There was only a handful around. But the digital revolution made it so much easier because anybody could walk out with a recorder into a room, set it down, ask some questions, and walk out. It was no longer adding a little bit of radio static or a germanium diode to your antenna. It was just simply putting down a digital recorder and pressing play record. Now, a lot of people have asked me, well, what about the background noise? How can we record EVP today without that background noise? And your digital recorder has integrated circuits, and integrated circuits are inherently noisy. They don't make absolute noiseless integrated circuits at the consumer level. You can get some of them in the professional audio level, but we're talking tens of thousands of dollars. At the consumer level, with your little recorder, it's noisy as heck with the signal going through there, but there are filters built in, so you don't hear that noise. You don't hear that noise as it's transformed into EVP. So you have that noise in your hand or on the floor or on the table where you're setting your digital recorder. And another thing with EVP is there's also something called background what it does is it takes the background noise and any bumps, any creaks, any breaths, and that noise can be transformed into EVP as well. There are so many different methods for EVP to be recorded that most people are just completely ignoring. They're just putting down a standard recorder and saying, hey, is anybody here? And that's it. And those who are actually taking the time and putting in the effort and building protocols and studying EVP on how it was and integrating it in their sessions today are getting much better results.
That's just amazing. Yeah, I would never have thought that just plain noise, not white noise, but just plain noises around you can be manipulated like that.
Oh, absolutely. If you're, for example, you've done a lot of ghost hunting and you look at EVPs, you look at the waveform of an EVP, but you'll also notice like there's several pops and it'll just be like you're in silence and there's this one big spike. And if you actually pay attention to that spike and at the very end of it, if you amplify the very end of it, sometimes you get an EVP because it's being transformed by the noise in the room. That pop that could just be a wall settling or a floor settling, that can be turned into EVP that's used. There's a whole white paper on it that was published by the good folks over at Association Transcommunication. And you can look into it. And they've actually done the studies and the different ways that the sound can be transmogrified into EVP.
That's astounding. I will be going there after this show. You know, I have a question for you, and I don't think I have ever asked you this. But when I am doing a session, whether I'm indoor or outdoor in the beautiful, area around here, I have a problem in that no matter how I approach, what I say, what I do, they call me names. And it's always, the B word, which is better than some. But I'm just kind of like, really? I'm being as genuine as I know how to be. I really want to know. I was outside. There was this beautiful blue hole. I'd never seen one before. And I was just astounded by the beauty of this setting. And I was like, do you just absolutely love this area? It's beautiful. And again, I got bitch. And I was just like, I don't really think I deserved that. Why are you calling me names? And I never get a response to that question. So it used to really upset me. And now sometimes it still does. But, I really don't quite know what to say.
Fair enough. So are you talking EVP or are you talking ghost box in these situations?
Ghost box and EVP. I hear it later sometimes as well.
Well, there's a lot to unpack there. First of all, one thing I want to assure your listeners is anybody that calls you the B word is not a demon. There are so many people out there that are claiming curse words or anything like that obviously must come from a demon because it's manifesting from the ether and showing up on a recorder. Therefore, it must be a demonic entity trying to possess you or whatever. That's gobbledygook. That's
mainly they just offend me. Yeah, I mean, I don't tolerate living people doing that.
So there's a couple different things here. One, have you listened back to it and to hear if it's the same voice over and over?
It is the same voice over and over. That's strange that you brought that up. I never tell people that when I first start talking about it.
Okay, well, that's pretty simple. That's some form of entity that is interested in you. They're around you, and we all have these entities around us, and most of us can't see them or hear them, but it's called a contact field. And those of us who go out and we do active ghost hunting or ITC sessions to reach the other side, every time you introduce yourself to the other side at any location or even in your own home when you're doing these things, you're basically flipping a switch where your energy pattern is recognized and they can stick with you. And usually the most that they can do is kind of cuss you out if they're one of these low vibration beings that want to do that. And the fun thing about that is we have the power to basically tell them, if you don't stop, I'm not going to listen to you. Like with a ghost box, if I had a problem with swearing for a long time, because I did it in groups and I did it obviously at home. At home, I didn't get much, but in groups, there were women being called the C word, F-bombs were being dropped all the time. And what I found that worked was I would tell them, if you don't stop this cussing, I'm going to turn the ghost box off. And what they want to do is they want to be heard by you. They want to be acknowledged by you. So if you take that away from them, they know that they no longer have a way for you to listen to them. So that basically cleans the swearing up right away. Once you make good on that threat, that you won't allow them to speak any longer if they're going to be swearing at you.
I will do that because I thought that I was crazy because I was like, that sounds like the same person. that sounds like the same voice. And it would happen on residentials. It would happen when I was, just going through a location. I've had it happen in my friend's jail up in Ohio that I love to research in. And her spirits there are so comfortable being there that, it is often the same people that you're talking to. They have some transients and stuff because she thinks there's a portal there, could be. But, basically you're talking to the same guys most of the time. And that voice, she doesn't know that voice, but that voice would come through up there as well. And it was just interesting.
I've had these same voices come through for me in several countries. It's one of those things that on the other side, space means nothing. When, for example, if you're ghost hunting and you get an EVP, one of the common misconceptions is the EVP that you get must be from one of the spirits that are there in that asylum, jail, cemetery, whatever you're investigating, residential. It must be a spirit from that location. Nothing could be further from the truth. It could be a spirit that you were at the Walmart earlier in the day picking up batteries for your investigation, and it found you interesting, and it tagged along with you for the night. It could be a spirit that's part of the contact field of one of your investigation partners. That's why I always stress that we do not know who or what we're communicating with at any given point in time. Because a spirit or the conscious entity that's talking to us claims to be person X, if you don't have questions to ask about person X to verify that, blinded questions, because if you know the answer, then they may know the answer. So it'd have to be a third party who wouldn't have these questions for you. Or if you don't know the sound of their voice, there's no way you can claim that it is such and such person. You don't know who you're talking to. You don't know what you're talking to.
Exactly.
The only thing you know is we're talking to discarnate consciousness with intent to speak to us. That's all that we can know.
That is actually really interesting because I tell people all the time. There've been a lot of these new ideas in spirit communication that have been being implemented in different locations that I like. And I respect the man who has been teaching people to do this, but I personally think it's a terrible idea. And that is a human pendulum. So you're giving control of you to something or someone you have no idea of and allowing it to use your body to, wiggle you in this or that direction, like a Ouija board, or like the planchette on a Ouija board.
Yeah, it's another form of mediumship. Trance mediumship, where they physical mediumship, where they physically take over your body or take over your voice. It's basically it's going past the consciousness you have in your body so that consciousness can overtake. It's been done, well, for people who use a pendulum, for example, not just human pendulums, but standard pendulums, Ouija boards, ghost boxes. I mean, so much out there, you are actually giving up part of your body for communication. Automatic writing. There's interesting studies on things like automatic writing. They use some mediums down in Brazil who'd been practicing automatic writing for at least 20 years apiece, and they did scanning of the brain when they were in the automatic writing state. And what they found was the part of the brain that's used for language is drastically diminished, but a different part of the brain lights up during these particular sessions. And not only did a different part of the brain be used during these sessions, but the language that was written was more complex or in a completely different voice than what the automatic writer would have in their normal life. So it doesn't matter what form of mediumship that you're using, you're giving up your body. And I do have to say that, when you're doing this, you don't know what you're bringing in. Most of it is absolutely benign. That's why physical mediumship has been part of the human experience for, since the Oracle of Delphi, as far as we know. But there are things that you can let in, or even entities that don't mean you any harm, but they can be just so overpowering that it can wreak havoc on you.
That is my take on it. I mean, I don't have any interest in giving control of any aspect of me, but certainly not willingly. I have had instances where I didn't feel myself in the course of an investigation, and I wasn't. But I learned very quickly how to shield. I'm pretty good at that now. But I have a question for you in chat, if you don't mind.
Oh, go right ahead.
And that was, have you ever had an entity answer a question that you had thought but never said aloud?
Oh, absolutely. And the best part is when you get answers to questions before you ask them, which tells me that not only because we know the spatial aspect of the other side doesn't matter, because you can get the same voices anywhere you go, such as you've experienced and most other people who are serious about the field have experienced but may not even recognize yet. But more importantly, time becomes one of these things that seems to be thrown out the window as well, because you can get these answers before you even ask them, which is just absolutely stunning. I can't tell you how many times I have been using a box and I will get just a word or a minor phrase, and then I'll ask the question a second or two later. And I often link this to, I think I've explained it on here before, I may not have, but my personal pet theory on all of this, and obviously it's completely unprovable because we can't test it, but we are basically skin suits being driven by consciousness.
Yes.
This body is used to process stimuli, which is sent to a consciousness which is in another dimension. Let's use that particular term because it's most fitting for your audience. So when I hold a phone in my hand, I'm feeling the phone, I'm seeing the phone, but it's being processed somewhere else. That's why we cannot find the locus of consciousness in the brain. They keep searching for it, and it cannot be found. What we can find is different areas that light up with stimulus, but we cannot find consciousness, the seat of original thought, of breakthroughs, of thinking and emotion and everything else. So I think that we are transmitting this consciousness to a different dimension. Now, in this other dimension are all the other consciousnesses as well. So when we're communicating with a consciousness, let's say it's through EVP or Ghost Box, what's happening is on this other dimension, I could have that entity right in front of my face, and I could be communicating with that entity, and the entity can just fire the question back, or I'm thinking it, and I can get that answer flung back to me. And the thing is, when you're on this other dimension, the speed of thought or whatever means of communication that we have is going to be way quicker than what we can receive through the speed of sound through our EVPs and our ghost boxes. So I think that is how the communication occurs. And I think that's also how people can, if you look at this particular theory, it also unlocks a lot of things about psychics, where psychics are communicating with these discarnate consciousnesses. They may not physically be present in the room with them, but these thoughts and voices that pop into their head is coming from another dimension. And we're doing it all the time. We don't even realize it. When we dream, we're walking through these other dimensions. We have mediumship, as we've discussed, where consciousness from another dimension is taking over your body. When you are, for example, practicing remote viewing, your physical consciousness is leaving the skin suit it's driving, and it's looking at something somewhere else in the world, in the galaxy, in time and space. It's your consciousness observing it, and your physical body is processing that. And I think that is the whole secret to everything paranormal, is we have to really drill down on consciousness, because it is the subjective consciousness experience that we have as investigators that basically pulls all of everything that we're doing together, because that's the only way we can understand it, is through the conscious experience that we have in this physical body.
Unbelievable. You know, you're blowing my mind a little bit, because I'm actually researching an article on that particular topic with the dimensionality. But you're right. I would never have contemplated that this was something that didn't matter. And we had another question for you in chat that I have done, and I'm curious if you have or not, but when you look at this stuff, we are late for a break. Let's go ahead and get this in, and we'll be right back, y'all. You know, the good stuff, it always slows me down.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experience Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Oh, come on. I'm Southern, but... nope. That'll do. Hello. I am Kat Hobson, host of Paranormal Experience here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. I enjoy having guests from all areas of the paranormal, from ghosts to ufology to cryptids and beyond. You'll find some of the best researchers in their fields bringing you some great information. Join me on Wednesday nights from 8 to 10 p. Eastern here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Since 1948, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Fate Radio is carrying on that tradition, bringing you the unusual, macabre, strange, and bizarre. Join host Kat Hobson Sunday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experienced Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Welcome back to Fate Mag Radio, and I am so sorry we had to duck on you that quickly, but we are back with Tim Woolworth, and I had to cut him off, basically. So, had you finished your thought? Were you satisfied with where we stopped?
Yeah, I think I answered the question, and I just want to say once again, that's a pet theory. There's nothing provable in there whatsoever, other than the studies that have been done on mediums and remote viewers that show that, you know, your consciousness can exist in two places. Or heck, I'll just add an addendum to it. Talk about the near-death experience, where, you know, that's the classic thing where the soul or the spirit leaves the body, and you can observe things and hear things that you couldn't physically hear because you were dead on the table. And that's another great example of the existence of consciousness outside of the physical body.
Isn't that just wild? And, you know, that is something else that fascinates me, because it is relevant to how the communication goes, is how these people that were in the first experiment with Dr. Moody came to him. They're physicians and their nurses and other people connected him with them because they knew that they had had that experience. So I was interviewing him when about a year into doing radio, and he actually lives near me. And I was speaking with him, and one of the women in the chat room was someone that I knew. And I was like, well, hey, thank you for being here tonight. She said, I was in his study. It's like, get out of town. I mean, she lives up in Washington State. It's been probably 5 years since that happened, and I met her through Margaritaville.com. She's a Parrot Head, and that's how we connected years and years, 20 years ago. So, you just never know. People are interesting no matter where you find them. So, pretty good. But there's another question. We may run over with this, and if we do, we'll just pick it back up. But the question is, have you ever used pre-recorded questions and then used a recorder, like left it alone to see if they answer?
Yes, I have done that at several locations. It's fun, but I haven't obtained anything that I wouldn't obtain by asking the same question several times over, which harkens back to the beginning of this interview. But one of the things that you can do if you're at a location is if you get a question and an answer, you can play the answer back and ask a question on a recorder saying, did you say this? And then play it. And then, just keep looping that. And you may get a response to it. Another fun thing you can do is on the eastern side of the country, you have a lot of battleground areas. So like if you're, for example, in the South and you're in a Civil War area, you can leave a recorder playing in the background, but you don't need the audio output of a Civil War song or things of that nature to see if it triggers EVP for you. There is so much that you can do with sound in the paranormal field. One of the cool things is, like I said, you can play the Civil War music in the background, but like on a laptop, for example, or a recorder, but not have the volume up, and it will still be picked up by the other side. The way that we figured this out was through a researcher several decades ago. The man who helped design the communication system between Houston and the space shuttles is also one of the early EVP guys. He's in his late 80s now, and he's functionally retired, but Alexander McRae. And he lives in Scotland, and he went over to the UK, and he took a standard recorder, and what he did was he put it in one of the cages that was actually designed by Faraday. It was an original Faraday cage.
Oh, wow.
I can't remember if it was at Cambridge or Oxford. And he removed the microphone mechanism from the recorder entirely and just put it in record. And guess what? He still recorded EVP. It was imprinted directly on the recorder without being able to pick up any sound. So there is so much out there that has yet to be explored. And this was decades ago. I mean,
that is so freaky.
Yeah, there's so much that if you can think of an experiment, do it. There's nothing preventing you from doing it, and you can learn a lot, and more importantly, help teach other people in the process.
That is just astounding. I mean, I'm blown away. I really am. I had not thought to do that. And it's actually the next logical step, because we know that they're imprinting. And I was at Sloss not so long ago, and I just I heard somebody stomping around when there was no one else there because it was a nasty day. But a friend of mine wanted to go ghost hunting, and his children followed the shows, and they wanted to go, and they're adults, so we went. And I just kind of yelled up the stairs, "Who is that walking around up there?" And I just I stayed to see if I could hear anything, but I did not. So when I got home and was listening, I had 3 guys, and one of them was like, a bad customer. And this other little guy, I say this all the time, but it was so weird because it's a little German voice. I said, Jawohl. And then the guy that they were talking about had a comment about it. And I'm like, I just got 3 people in the middle of Sloss answering my question and, commenting on each other. That's so cool. So I just had the best time with that. But I had no idea that they were doing it because normally I will hear every so often. Not normally. But, well, this is going to be a gimme, I think, for you. But I'm curious about the difference between these formats. Have you used a cassette recorder?
I have used cassette recorder.
What is your comparison analysis of them and digital?
I prefer digital just because of ease of use and storage. And I've recorded great EVPs on both formats. Cassette is fine. It's analog. It's nice and clean. But, it's cassette. It breaks down with generations, and you've got to really store them properly. But it works great. I have inherited the bulk of Sarah Estep's original cassettes. And for those who don't know, Sarah Estep founded the American Association of EVP and both basically brought EVP to America way back in 1982. And all of her early EVPs I have, and they're all on cassette, but they were stored properly. And a lot of people don't do that. They will store them on their side. As opposed to up and down. If you store them on their side, some of the particles can slough off and you'll lose quality. And with digital, digital's never lost. You can throw it in a cloud easy. You don't have to run through a converter to get it into a digital format for saving and for editing, et cetera, et cetera. It basically comes down to what you like. There are people that I've seen use just the voice recorder on their cell phone. There are people out there who still use microcassette that you normally use for voice dictation on ghost hunts. It's completely up to the user, and yeah, anything will work. What I've basically found through all these years of research is whenever you dedicate yourself to a form of communication, spirit's going to find a way. And this has been true since day one. We look at the first EVP site that was ever on the web. It's no longer up, but it was called Coffee Pot Ghost, and it was a lady named Charlie, and she thought she heard voices in her percolator. This is going back to the early 90s, mid-90s. So she wound up recording it and found out that there were messages coming from her coffee maker.
Oh my gosh.
Because she dedicated herself to that form of communication. And that's how the whole field of ITC has blossomed, whether it's EVP or, steam or liquid image moving, a ghost box. Anytime that people actually faces and sound, like my buddy Keith is doing, anytime that you dedicate yourself to a form of communication, the communication will find a way to work with you.
That's bizarre and fascinating because it means they want to.
Exactly. You've got to consider we are, we're here in 2021 now, and there are people from all over the world who have been trying to explore the whole spiritualist aspect of things for centuries now as a science. And all those people are on the other side. We've got all of our early EVP and ITC researchers. They're on the other side. There have been recordings from people like Mark Macy, who was one of the first ITC guys in America, where basically they said that they're on the other side and they're trying to build equipment on the other side to interface with ours so they can build the bridge.
Oh, wow. That's pretty great. I'm so impressed by that. That is, has anybody asked him how close he is?
Oh, I don't know. Mark's not into it anymore. He's retired. But for example, in the world of ghost boxes, Frank Sumption left almost 6 years ago now, and he said he would never communicate. And guess what? Frank was coming through 2 days later for my particular devices communicating, and he's come through for a few other people who knew him well. And we get little snippets all the time, like tune this, tune that. And I'm not an electronics engineer. It doesn't mean much to me, but I pass it on to other people to whom it can make a difference.
Yes. Wow. Well, we're at the top of the hour break, so everyone fill up your beverage container, throw a few cartwheels, and we'll catch you back on the flip side. Thank you so much for being here. You're not going to want to miss the second hour. We'll see you then.
Live from NPR News, I'm Janine Herbst. Georgia Senator David Perdue, facing a runoff election on Tuesday, is urging his Senate colleagues to vote against accepting the results from the November election. As Emil Moffitt of member station WABE reports, Perdue himself won't be able to cast a vote because his 6-year term officially ended today.
Republicans likely don't have enough votes in the last-minute attempt to overturn the results of the election, but close to a dozen GOP senators have said they plan to object on Wednesday to the Electoral College results. Perdue, appearing on Fox News, urged more of his fellow Republicans to join them, based on unfounded claims of widespread voter fraud in a handful of battleground states, including Georgia. President Trump spent more than an hour on the phone with Georgia's Republican Secretary of State this weekend, pleading with him to find enough votes to upend Joe Biden's 11,000-vote victory in the state. Both Georgia Senate seats and control of the U.S. Senate are up for grabs in Tuesday's runoff. For NPR News, I'm Emil Moffitt in Atlanta.
Nancy Pelosi has been reelected House Speaker. The new Congress convened today, and its first vote was to return her to the House's top job.
The total number of votes cast is 427, of which the Honorable Nancy Pelosi of the state of California has received 216.
That's Clerk of the House Cheryl Johnson, and it was a slim victory. Pelosi's 216 votes narrowly topped the 209 votes Republican Congressman Kevin McCarthy got. He remains minority leader. The 80-year-old Pelosi has led House Democrats since 2003 in non-consecutive terms and is the only woman to ever hold the job. She has, though, hinted that this may be her final term as leader of the House. Pharmacists working at Walmart raised alarms for years about booming opioid sales, and they say the company ignored their warnings. That's according to an investigation by NPR. Addiction correspondent Brian Mann has more.
Walmart faces a wave of lawsuits, including a complaint by the Justice Department tied to shipment and sales of billions of highly addictive opioid pills. NPR found former pharmacists sent emails and memos warning company executives some of those sales appeared illegal and unsafe. One former Walmart pharmacist, Ashwani Sheeran, said Walmart managers told him to stay quiet.
They told me, do not reach out to the DA or do not call the police. If you're going to do so, your employment going to be terminated immediately.
Walmart declined NPR's interview requests. In public statements, company executives say Walmart acted ethically when selling opioid medications. More than 400,000 Americans have died from overdoses during the opioid epidemic. Brian Mann, NPR News.
And you're listening to NPR News from Washington. In East Texas, the pastor is dead and 2 other people are injured after a shooting this morning inside a church. Authorities say a suspect is under arrest. From member station KERA, Miranda Suarez has more.
Smith County Sheriff Larry Smith told reporters on Sunday the suspect was fleeing law enforcement for an unknown reason on Saturday night. Smith says the suspect used Starville Methodist Church in Winona as a place to hide. He says the pastor found the suspect in the bathroom on Sunday morning. And according to the sheriff, it seems the suspect shot and killed the pastor with the pastor's own gun.
Nothing related to this time about any religious beliefs or anything to do with church. The church just happened to be the location that he was able to get into and take refuge.
The sheriff's office plans to investigate the case as a capital murder. For NPR News, I'm Miranda Suarez.
Health officials say COVID-19 vaccinations are behind schedule, with around 4 million inoculations. That's far fewer than the 20 million the Trump administration promised by the end of the year. But Dr. Anthony Fauci, the government's top infectious disease expert, says President-elect Joe Biden's pledge to administer 100 million shots of the vaccine within his first 100 days of office is achievable. The COVID-19 death toll in the U.S. has now exceeded 350,000. Meanwhile, UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson says he may enact even stricter lockdown measures in England as the country deals with the new, more contagious variant of the coronavirus that has seen infection rates soar to the highest levels in years. I'm Janine Herbst, and you're listening to NPR News.
You're listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experience Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Welcome back to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. The time is 5 minutes after the hour. Hello there. Welcome back for the second hour of Fate Mag Radio, the online voice of Fate Magazine, which, by the way, we have got a special going on. I think it still is. If you order a new magazine, or if you do a subscription, you'll have to look at the website. You get a t-shirt, and I'm here to tell you that they are nice t-shirts. I got one. So I am going to be sporting it when I am out and about, and you can too. They're available at fatemag.com, and if your subscription is run out, no worries. You can renew it there. You can also get archives. There's some other merchandise. I really wish we'd get some of those trading cards again. People just love those, but we'll get them in time. But I hope that you have been enjoying the show so far. If you're just joining us, no worries. You can catch our archives on iHeart, iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube. You can pretty much find us anywhere you want to be. So we're trying to make it easy for you. So my guest tonight is Tim Woolworth, and we have been having the most interesting discussion. I am very appreciative of Tim's specialty. He is the founder of Paranormal Study. He is also the founder of ITC Voices. You can find both of those, paranormalstudy.com, itcvoices.org. He is brilliant. He is a great researcher. He is always somebody that you can go to and ask questions, and you've got a great platform here to do that because you can get answers for a lot of people. Just pop your question in chat and you will get that. And, I want to, before we go on, give a shout out to Mara Katria for the brilliance and rise of her solo as she is just going through the charts here. And I'm really proud of you, Mara. I never doubt you. So now we are back, and Tim, we have got even more things to ask. But we were talking about being able to use recorders versus digital recorders and the ease of storing and comparing. And April says she can't stand the news. I can't stand the news either. But you know what? Being uninformed is worse. So sometimes you have to suck it up and listen to it, or fill your beverage container, as the case may be. Whatever works for you. So were we finished with that thought as well?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay. I just hate to cut you off and then come back and zip on over to the next thing without having an opportunity just to be sure. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say I appreciate that. It's diligence on your part.
Well, you can't just get half the answer, right? You might be out in the field and really wish you had been able to get the rest of it. Now, we were talking about and I'm going back to this because I am amazed. When you were talking about removing the microphone and doing a session, or just letting it be known that you were looking for communication, and the gentleman in question, was that Alex McRae's experiment?
Yeah, Alec McRae, yeah.
So that is just so amazing to me. I know that you said that if you just put out the energy that you are wanting to communicate, that they are trying to communicate with us. So does it happen even with spirits that you don't know and that don't know you? And is it just the energy that is allowing them to be able to do that, in your opinion? The frequency? Or
yeah, that's a big question to unpack, because we have to answer that fully, we have to look at why they want to communicate with us. Well, we can dive into it, I guess. One of the main reasons I alluded to earlier is they want someone to talk to. They may not have passed on into the light, which is a different avenue we might explore later. But we have to realize that a lot of what we communicate with, these discarnate consciousnesses, they're in what we typically refer to, and once again, this is just what I've learned from research and reading. Anything that I say here is not fact, because we haven't proven it in the lab outside of the few studies that I've mentioned. So all of this is basically gleaned from reading and experience. I'm not going to say this is the end-all be-all, but it's based upon what I have coalesced over the years. Now, spirit, when you die, you're given a couple options, basically. You can go into the light, the classic NDE experience, or you can stay away from it. I've gotten communications saying that the lights are everywhere. I mean, they are everywhere on the other side. They can see, I think they see us as light. So the lights are everywhere on the other side. Now, when they don't go into the light, they don't move on to the next stage. What they do is they live in what is typically referred to as the near-Earth realm. It is the lowest level of vibration, if you will, is how it's been referred to. And there are entire maps of the other side that have been constructed by the Theosophists, or George Meek, for example, with his levels on the other side. And I actually have a copy of the George Meek map on ITC Voices, if you go to that site. Sorry, the site hasn't been updated in forever because I'm phasing it out and moving everything over to Paranormal Study. But if you go to that site and you search the word Meek, M-E-E-K, you will actually pull up the levels or layers, and you can pull it up on your computer and actually look at what I'm talking about right now. So when they go into this near-Earth realm, there's a lot of reasons that they do. One, it can be a complete shock that they're dead and they need time to comprehend. Two, they could be worried about something, whether it's their estate, whether it's their business, etc. Three, it could be a violent death and they don't understand what happened. You were here 1 minute, gone the next. It's an artificial death. You were killed out of the blue. Or another good example is 4, you're waiting for family, which is very, very common, where you want to wait for your wife, your parents, your kids to join you in this near-Earth realm. Now, in the near-Earth realm, time doesn't pass the way that we see it here. As we talked earlier about time and spatial recognition, I don't think it passes the same way it passes in our physical realm, where it's linear. So while they're in this near-Earth realm, most everybody passes out of this near-Earth realm at some point. Some take longer than others. And this is also the place where it's often been written that those that were the worst of us, they stay for the longest period of time to basically reflect and realize what went wrong in their life and to become a better individual and then move on to the next phase in their existence. So we're talking murderers, rapists, pedophiles, the slime of society. They're on the other side too. And there are those that are, trying to adjust and get ready to move on to the other side. And sometimes it's heartbreaking when you're doing an EVP session or a ghost box session, and you hear these people where they'll say things like, they're after me, they're coming to get me, help, all of these different terms where you can tell they're experiencing hell on earth on the other side. And because these individuals are closest to us, they're the easiest ones to communicate with, which is why, for example, you go out and you do EVPs and you get people who are cursing at you, Kat, because they're in the near Earth realm. And you get a lot of the worst individuals there. So when we're talking about EVP and why they want to communicate with us, there are some that during our daily life, some people pray, and that is kind of addressing those that have passed on, but we're talking about family and friends indirectly. Most of the time, these individuals on the other side, nobody is trying to reach out to them other than maybe some mediums. But then you've got these ghost hunters that come along, and they have devices that can capture their voices from the other side. And all of a sudden, they have a voice to communicate with you. So you're putting that effort into communicating with them directly, and then they've been waiting to talk to you. I've recorded so many sessions where there'll be things like one at a time said, or one of you step up, because there's so many people who want to talk and communicate from the other side that it actually has to be regulated by people we call techs on the other side to basically tell them that, we can only have one person coming through to make the communication stronger. And
I need to interrupt you right here.
Yeah.
So there are technicians?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Techs were first discovered in the work of Konstantin Radova. The first book that brought EVP to the Western world was a book called, Breakthrough, book about communicating with the dead. And if you it's basically a couple dozen pages of theory in the beginning, and then at the end, it's his mechanisms for how he worked it. But the bulk of it's 200 pages of just EVPs that he recorded, and it's really dry reading unless you're an EVP nerd like me. But there are EVPs where he would be complaining that the communication wasn't good enough, and an EVP would come across and says, "Wait, we'll get technician to make the communication better." So that was the first time that the word technician had actually been used, and it was used by the other side to describe entities on the other side. Fast forward to how I use the word technician, which is kind of how it's basically been used in the field today. It started for me in 2010. I was in Gettysburg on a blustery March day. And for those who've been there, there's a Little Round Top, and there's a marble castle on the top of Little Round Top. So when you're there, typically there are busloads of people coming in and out, in and out. It's a huge tourist place when you're on the battlefields. And Little Round Top, because of that castle, it's like the peak tourist place. And this particular morning, I was blessed. There were no tourists there. Maybe because it was rainy and windy, I don't know. But it was no buses, anything like that. So what do? I sit down in the middle of this castle and break out my ghost box and a speaker. And it was a mini box plus, and I started doing a session. And there was this woman and child that kept asking for help over and over. Help, help, help. And it was so clear in the reverberation in that room from the marble, I started to hear a voice on the other side that was basically translating what I was doing to them and having them talk through him to me. So it was kind of crazy, and the session is on ITC Voices. You can hear it. It's labeled as Little Round Top and whatnot. But you can hear a male voice that's basically the medium between myself and those I was communicating with them. And that was actually the first session where I ever helped people cross over to the other side via the help of a technician. I used the words, they popped into my head, kind of like mediumship as we were talking about. Where I said, can you see the people who surround me, my spirit guides? That's what I knew them as at that point in time. And then the tech comes through and he's like, oh, they left, which means they went to the other side. And then the spirit actually came back and said, thank you. We've been saved, all of this crazy stuff. It's an amazing session. It's what had me launch ITC Voices in the first place back in 2010. And I learned over time that these voices keep popping up, and it's the same voice over and over. And my main tech, his name is Tom. And every time I do a crossover session or I'm in a location, I always ask for Tom to make himself known, because that way I know I've got a good guy on the other side that I can work with. And Tom basically is my mediator to help crossover people that need them. I can't just say, hey, run to the light, Carol Ann. You can't do that. You have no control over the spirit realm. But what you can do is you can actually use someone like Tom on the other side, and he can guide them because he's on the other side, and he can bring them into the light and he can help them out. And I've done this countless times in front of countless audiences. It's always really gratifying to hear and watch people's faces when they hear it for the first time. But I didn't recognize Tom was a technician for a couple of years. And then I started to listen back to old sessions, and I kept hearing the word Tom, 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 Tom in the same voice over and over. I went to Australia and I did a quick session and I heard Tom over there. I heard Tom in Ireland, all these different places. He was popping up and I realized he was my tech. And the cool thing is I started using EchoVox when it first came out, and I was doing a crossover session with EchoVox, and this voice comes through that said, here comes Tom, they call him tech. So we actually had spirits on the other side addressing Tom as a tech, which was just mind-blowing. And that's on ITC Voices as well, because you get confirmation from the spirit realm that these techs exist.
We have to take a break. When we come back, I'm going to tell you why this is so big to me, because it's huge. So y'all hang with us. We will be right back.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, Birmingham, Alabama.
Paratalk Radio is your one-stop for all things paranormal, the unknown, and the supernatural. Join us every Monday night at 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central for discussions and guests on topics such as ghosts, hauntings, Bigfoot, UFOs, and more. This broadcast is rated M for mature and intended for listeners over 16 on paratalkradio.com.
Oh, come on. I'm Southern, but... nope. That'll do. Hello. I am Kat Hobson, host of Paranormal Experience here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. I enjoy having guests from all areas of the paranormal, from ghosts to ufology to cryptids and beyond. You'll find some of the best researchers in their fields bringing you some great information. Join me on Wednesday nights from 8 to 10 p. Eastern here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Since 1948, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Fate Radio is carrying on that tradition, bringing you the unusual, macabre, strange, and bizarre. Join host Kat Hobson Sunday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Thank you for listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Since 1948, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Fate Radio is carrying on that tradition, bringing you the unusual, macabre, strange, and bizarre. Join host Kat Hobson Sunday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
The time is 23 minutes after the hour. Welcome back to Fate Mag Radio, and I am so glad you're here. As you know, we are the online voice of Fate Magazine, Tales of the Strange and Unusual, and we have one here. I was talking with Tim about how he has just blown me out of the water with something that I felt very strongly about, and that is the use of text in spirit communication. I have not believed in them in the past, and I worked with someone who had his own and kept telling me, to feel free to use him. I was very disconcerted by Tim's experience when we were talking about this, because it is real. So Tim, thank you very much for opening my eyes. I am never too cocky to say I was wrong about something. And I learn something from you every time I talk to you. Look at a website, go and read anything. And thank you for that.
You're welcome. And I can take you deeper down the rabbit hole. In some private groups where a bunch of us ghost boxers get together. I mean, it started back in the old Yahoo groups back in the day, and then email listservs, and now Facebook groups. So once, text started coming to the forefront with the articles that I was doing, other people were asking me, how'd you find your tech? And I told them, I kept listening and finding the same voice, and it hits you over the head after a while because the same name just keeps popping up over and over and over. And then you realize, oh, there's this voice, this name that keeps showing up. So people started to log these names. And when I started to tell people about Tom started popping up for other people. Same voice. There are other ones out there like Stephanie and Michael and Walter and several other texts that have popped up on a lot of us. We're out there doing sessions, and the name Walter will pop up. And it's just, we don't know who this Walter is, but he shows up on several people's ghost boxes. Frank now shows up on several people's ghost boxes. I mean, he's become the reluctant tech on the other side. Don't know what he's doing over there, but he's having a great time. And techs just aren't limited to one person. They show up everywhere.
So do you think that these are people who had an expertise in communication in their lifetime?
I don't know that answer. What I've found through, most of this has been gleaned through ghost box communication because it's real time. You can get answers. You can hear these things from the other side. So what I've found is that there's several different types of communication that comes through. Breakthrough communication. I've labeled all these types of communication. One of the things that I started on ITC Voices was classifying different types of communication and positing theories and all this stuff. Basically, I wrote the book on ghost boxes, but it's over several articles online. So one of the things that I did is start classifying these voices from the other side. And texts I usually classify as breakthrough because it's conversation level like we're having right now. Like when Tom comes through, you hear Tom clear as day. And there are other spirits that come through that are more synth or angelic or tonal, where basically when they're coming through, it doesn't sound like a voice that could ever possibly derive from a human voice box. The frequencies are too high, for example. So I don't know if that is, they're communicating at a different level, and basically we're getting lower octaves coming through to the point where we can hear it in our 20 to 20 kilohertz range, or whether they are beings that were never of a human nature. So techs, to circle back to your question, their voices always seem to be of a human nature for the most part, but I don't know if that physically means that they were human at one point in time, or whether they're just an incarnation that has never come to Earth, but they're there to help humans in their transition and to help humans communicate with those on the other side. I don't have that answer for you at all.
Well, I'm afraid I'm going to need that answer, Tim. So we're just going to have to get on that.
4 decades or so, if everything goes well.
But, you know, it is so interesting because, I hate spirit boxes. I hate the white noise. I miss the words in the white noise if I'm listening live. And I have had a situation where that turned out to be a tragic thing. So, because I could not go back to the location I had been where this person was, and he was crying out for communication, and I missed it. Yeah. So I would much prefer to use something different from an SB of any type. And I actually have Danny's, had Danny's application since he came out with it. And I have never yet figured out how to use it. And I think he finally got tired of talking to me about it. But I still have it. And I still try every so often.
Yeah, she's speaking of EchoVox, which is really easy to use. It's an app for iOS and Android. Basically, what it is, a big thing of ITC is the randomization of sound. We can get into that, but basically the randomization of sound is what allows us to communicate. When we're dealing with, for example, EVP, you're basically dealing with, with the sounds in the background and noise. It can be anywhere in the white noise spectrum, from our physical hearing, to which is 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz, to beyond in the ultrasound or below in the infrasound. And depending on your recorder, it has a mic that has a roll-off, and you start to lose frequencies at certain ends. But basically, you're working with sounds that are random. It can be anywhere in the frequency range, or it can be all frequencies. So what EchoVox does is it takes micro audio files, which are hundredths to thousandths of a second long. They're just little clips. And it grabs a handful of these, and it can spit them out directly through a speaker, or you can actually blend them, where it'll grab like 6 or 7 random audio files, put them together in just a weird sound, and it goes out through your speaker. Now that's phase 1 of EchoVox. Phase 2 of EchoVox is where the magic happens, which is where when it goes out to an external speaker, what happens is that it's also using the microphone in your tablet or your phone. So it's picking up what's coming out of the speaker, and an echo loop builds, creating more randomized sounds for EVP or ITC to build upon. And it becomes a magical thing where I can ask a question. I could say, for example, the classic question, is there anyone here? And, depending on your settings, a second and a half later, you'll actually hear, is there anyone here, looping through again and again and again. And you build the sound on top of everything that's coming out of EchoVox. And you'll start to get just clear communication coming through, where they will answer your questions. And it's just, it's a phenomenal piece of software that was discovered basically by mistake with the echo looping. The randomization of audio was first discovered by Stefan Bayan back in 2000, when he created software called EVP Maker, which is unfortunately no longer available. It was available until very recently, but Stefan had a change of heart, and he's no longer in the field. But EVP Maker, what you do is you'd enter an audio file, for example, a Chinese news broadcast, and it would break it up into micro audio files, randomize it, and spit it back out at you. But there was no echo loop involved.
Wow. Well, I guess I wasn't patient enough.
Oh, it's always fun to work with. For me, my personal choice, I always use BankB. And there's only a couple of apps out there on the marketplace that I'll use, and that is one of them.
Well, I really wanted to use it. I mean, I bought it, right? And I just could not. And like I said, I think he got frustrated because at that time, we're talking years ago.
Yeah.
And I was not quite as technical on that side of it as I am now. So I haven't pulled that thing up and actually put it into use in a while. I think I'm going to go play with that some more. But
yeah, I think on ITC Voices, if you search Echovox, I have a full explanation on there, and I may actually have the original video that Danny has that described how to use it.
Well, yeah, and there's articles from Daniel too, so that's going to help too. But I love this site, just so everybody knows that. We have just had so many people in chat that I'm always afraid I'm going to lose a question, right? But I did find one, and this is interesting. I'm kind of interested in your answer because it's off topic. What are, if any, of the paranormal TV shows on that you respect and think maybe 60% is real? She says that because we all know TV has a tendency to embellish stories a little. Haha.
As a paranormal researcher, I am quite embarrassed to say that I don't watch paranormal television, and I haven't watched it since about 2011. I've watched a couple of select episodes that have had friends in it, but I am basically completely out in the blue when it comes to those questions because I don't pay attention to paranormal pop culture. It doesn't interest me. I'm more interested in the research side, and you're not going to find that on a television show.
Well, I agree. And I actually was on, what is the name of that? Oh, good heavens. I am never going to be allowed to be on another television show. It's the one with Katrina Weidman and Jack Osbourne. And that was filmed actually at my friend's jail. And I don't watch paranormal television. And because most of it, I know the people in it, like you. And I know, I've investigated with a lot of them. So sometimes I watch it, but a lot of times I don't. And it's just one of those things that, you're either doing it or you're watching people do it. Portals to Hell. Thank you so much, Lori, for saving me from myself. But, and I do want to let them know that I thoroughly enjoyed it and thank you so much. But it was, that was the most realistic, a lot more realistic than I anticipated, to be quite frank. And I did not anticipate the level of professionalism that I saw in that production company. It was just astounding. But I do think that, like you, I'd rather be doing it than watching somebody else do it. And
yes. I don't have an answer as to who is the most professional out there because I can't speak to their techniques on television. I'm sorry.
Exactly. Well, I'm just saying, it was a nice surprise. I didn't know what to expect. It was my first time dealing with television people. But she said that she had a feeling you'd answer that way. Well, it's the truth. If you don't want to know the truth, you can't ask this guy. But what do you think is going to be the next big thing relevant to ITC, the paranormal? I know that you and your partner are working on a fabulous library of archives, but going forward, do you think it's going to be the same methodology implemented that's going to continue to get these fantastic results, or do you think there's something else out there that's going to, I'm thinking quantum, right? Quantum computing, quantum math. I mean, there's so many different ways to interact that we have not been aware of until now. Do you see that being something that's going to come in play with ITC?
Well, it's hard to say, per se. I think that ITC, as it stands now, there are some inventive things that are going on, like Keith Clark. He is running Paranormal and Faces and Sound, and what he's done is he's taken visual static, and what he tries to have that static form a face, for example.
Right.
And visual ITC is quite popular out there. There's a lot of different ways of visual ITC that people probably aren't familiar with, like steam and lights and ultrasound. So there'll be an ultrasound pushing through steam, and there are various lights that are used and filters that are used on cameras. And like IFRES in France, they're getting full-bodied apparitions showing up right now, which is something that just isn't practical to use out in the field. You have to do it in a lab. Other forms of ITC, like moving water ITC, you can do out in the field if you want, but most of that stuff is done at home. How I see the trend going is basically we're mixing new with old. And I think that spirit communication is going to move forward with mixing new and old, because we basically, with everything that's ever been invented in mankind, we just improve upon what's been done before.
Right.
Very few things in life have just been absolute breakthroughs from the word go. Most of it is an improvement on what's been done before. So I anticipate seeing things like a lot more mediumship coming back and using more old school toys with a digital twist. Like I could see table tilting coming back with pressure sensors to see if anyone's actually touching the table, or EVP that can be used, a Ouija board that can be used that has LEDs and is used, and you use a planchette that is electromagnetic, for example. Fun things like that where you won't be able to influence it with your physical self. I see that coming more into the future. I think going further into the digital realm, working with trying to make faces out of digital randomness, binaries, zeros and ones, making sounds out of binaries, zeros and ones. From the other side. For example, a lot of your listeners may not be familiar with the work that's going into Soul Phone right now. Soul Phone is an ITC device that is basically working through an application, and it's being developed at the University of Arizona under Dr. Gary Schwartz, who is the chief of the psychiatry department. And he's trying to establish communication with the other side that can use a physical device here in our physical realm. So right now, according to the reports that I'm getting, they've sunk over $1 million into this, and they can get confirmation of yes, no's. But looking pie in the sky into the future, they're envisioning things where it's not only yes, no's, but they can manipulate other media. So they can do holographic projections in the future and things like that.
Oh my goodness.
That's where we're, that's pie in the sky decades down the road, but that's where we're heading, where you can actually see a spirit communicating with you in real time.
That's wicked cool. And on that note, we're going to go ahead and get this commercial break out of the way so that we'll be done with that. And we have got another great question or two in the chat, so we'll get those when we get back. Thanks for being here. Y'all come back too.
You're listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experience Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Oh, come on. I'm Southern, but... nope. That'll do. Hello. I am Kat Hobson, host of Paranormal Experience here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. I enjoy having guests from all areas of the paranormal, from ghosts to ufology to cryptids and beyond. You'll find some of the best researchers in their fields bringing you some great information. Join me on Wednesday nights from 8 to 10 p. Eastern here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Since 1948, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Fate Radio is carrying on that tradition, bringing you the unusual, macabre, strange, and bizarre. Join host Kat Hobson Sunday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experienced Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Welcome back. We are beginning our final segment here on Fate Mag Radio, and I am sorry to say that. This has been great. I love when I get a chance to learn. But, Tim, I have questions for you. They're not my questions, but here you go. Are you ready?
Of course.
All right. Do you think ghost boxes could possibly reach someone astral projecting or dreaming?
Yes. And I have a whole article written on that. It's if you go to ITC Voices in the upper left-hand corner, there's where to start. And then you look for projection of consciousness. On several occasions, I've recorded the voice of someone known to me. And they've imparted information that is basically information I did not know. So the first time this happened, it was a late night back in 2010 or so, and I was doing a session at home. And it was probably 3 or 4 in the morning. I'm not a night owl. It's when I do most of my research, most of my writing. And I was doing a session, and I reviewed it a couple days later, and I heard a voice on there, and it said Timmy, and then it said the word Karina. And the way it said Timmy, it was instantly recognizable to me because I had a roommate in the 90s named Sean, and we were best friends back then, and that was during the time when South Park came out and the character of Timmy came on. So he always said my name in that particular manner as the television show. And we had lost touch. He lived in California. I was living in New York at the time, but I still had his email address. So it said Timmy, and then it said the word Karina. So I instantly emailed Sean, and I'm like, Sean, give me a call. Here's my number. Let me explain what's going on here. So I had to explain to him all about ghost boxes and my paranormal endeavors and blah, blah, blah. And then he's like, okay, send it to me. So both of us used to be audio engineers. And he was an audio engineer, I think, at Knott's Berry Farm at that particular point in time. So I sent it to him, and he instantly called me back, and he's like, dude, that's my voice, and it says Karina. And I'm like, yeah, what's Karina mean to you? He's like, I just met her. So they'd been dating for about 2 weeks, and they're still together a decade later. He was sleeping at the time, to the best of his recollection. Same thing happened again. I was doing a session middle of the night, and a voice came through on a Frank's box. It simply said, hi, Tim. And it was crystal clear. I mean, crystal clear, like the person's in the room with me. And it was the voice of Pam, who was on my ghost hunting team. She lived about 45 miles north of me, and she was practicing lucid dreaming at the time. So I took it a step further, and I took Pam's voice and the voice on the recording, and I ran them through a spectrogram to look at basically the frequencies, and the frequency range matched up, which freaked me the heck out, because when you think about how a voice is created, you're intaking air, it pushes out from your diaphragm through your pharynx, your larynx, your tongue, all of that fun stuff. And all of these things create a voice pattern that is unique to the individual. So we have a voice in 2 instances coming through that matches the voice of the person who is alive and well. And that tells me that Either they're really good at imitation in the way that they talk to us, or they are physical beings on the other side trying to communicate, which I don't have the answer for how they do that. It still puzzles me to this very day. And the third instance is the one that's just the cream of the crop. I was on a ghost hunt. We were in an old funeral parlor. It was a fabulous haunted location. And we were downstairs doing a quick ghost box session, and I didn't catch it in real time. I caught it on review like everything. So this is back in 2011, and I'm recording sessions on ghost boxes, which nobody was doing back then. It was super, super rare because everybody just, those few people in the world that had them used them in real time. So, and didn't record it because, as you know, listening back is a major pain in the ear.
True.
So I'm doing a session, and I get a voice that comes through that says, in a way, it's pissing me off. And then the person's voice that came through the radio was sitting at the table right next to me. And she speaks right afterwards, trying to interpret it. And she interpreted it badly, and she said, go back the way, something about help. So I've got her voice coming through a radio while she's sitting right next to me, and she speaks directly after that. So I've got the recorded radio version of her voice and her speaking side by side, less than 2 seconds difference between the two. And all of these examples are on that article, Projection of Consciousness on ITC Voices. And it blows my mind. So yes, that's why I stress that you don't know who or what you're speaking with, because you can be talking to someone who's dreaming somewhere in the United States right now, or India, for example.
Just astounding. Just astounding.
You take it a step further. So if we know that consciousness can change our equipment, can change the environment that we're investigating with. All of a sudden, you're on a hunt and you say, hey, can you knock 3 times like this? And you get 3 knocks back. Is that somebody's consciousness in the room with you creating that knock? Is it one of those team or something you're thinking and you're manifesting it yourself?
And that can go so easily that way.
It can. So that means that any evidence you've ever got on a ghost hunt, you cannot say it's evidence. You don't know if you created it or not.
That is something that always gives me pause. Jay Ryan in chat says he thinks that you were just tuning the dead zones on an AM's radio, not a spectral device. Well, could be. You never know. We have one more question, and I'm curious about this. I would probably not ask you this because I'm not sure that this would apply. But then again, we all have our moments. Have you ever had anything happen to you on an investigation that startled you? She said, I'd say scare, but don't think you scare easily. Or when you got home and reviewed evidence, you're like, holy cow, that happened?
2 incidences that have happened that have rattled me to my core. I used to be a very active investigator. I'm not much of an active investigator anymore, mainly research-oriented now. The first one happened, it was the home of a Pittsburgh steel magnate who died on the Titanic. And it was this massive mansion, and it had a bunch of outbuildings and a caretaker's house. So we, at that point, the team I was with back in New York, it was a large team. We had about 20 people, so we broke up into groups of 3 because there were enough buildings to handle a rotating group all night long. And the caretaker's house, everybody who went in there kept reporting such paranormal activity, and they all said, wait for Tim, wait for Tim, wait for Tim. He's going to be able to talk to you. So they were kind of priming the pump before I even got down there. So I had that location at the end of the night, and I walked into the location, and instantly cold gripped me entirely. And I was like, oh, this is going to be fun. So we did standard EVP, and during the pauses between questions, you could hear this low burble in the background, like conversation happening, but it wasn't loud enough to understand it. It was a caretaker's house. It was down the road. It was a huge property. There was nothing around the place. We went around the house, examined it. There's no place these voices could be coming from. And I started a ghost box session, and it was getting late in the night. And I got this group of soldiers that had died at the Cherry Hill or Cherry Valley massacre. I can't remember off the top of my head. Basically, there were soldiers that died at the hands of the Mohawk tribe because the Mohawks were paid by the British to kill them in their sleep. And it happened a couple miles from where this location was. And they started to come through, and I started to do the crossing over and told them to get ready and have everybody stand up. And I would introduce them to Tom and all that gobbledygook. When all of a sudden the group founder burst in the door and said, "Wrap it up, time to go." So we'd only been slated to be there till a certain hour. So I made a critical mistake young in my career. I said, "Hey guys, I'm going to turn on my box tomorrow and I'll talk to you then and we'll complete this." And at that moment, I had an attachment, and that attachment lasted for several days. And I basically, all I could do was sleep. I had no energy whatsoever. Mm-hmm. I had to work. I even fell asleep eating. And I didn't even have the energy to do a ghost box session. And it was day 3 or day 4. I collected African masks at that time, and I passed out. And one of the masks during my sleep had moved off the wall to the middle of the room, laying on the floor, twisted 90 degrees, and was facing me. And I felt fine after that. That was them telling me that they had left. So that was number 1. And I had basically invited an attachment in, and it stuck around for a few days. Number 2, I was doing a house down in the Gettysburg region that the Mason-Dixon line went right through the middle of it, so they chained the slaves to the wall every night because they were a couple steps from freedom, basically. And the basement had been exorcised a few times. There were all the old priest markings down there. It was a pretty creepy place, and the cornerstone was from like 1740. So I went into the basement, and I was at the head of the table, and on either side were 3 chairs and another chair at the end of the table. And all the other chairs were taken up by various women. So I get down there in the slaves' quarters and as a white man sitting at the head of the table and start to ask questions. And no one had ever investigated this place before. There had always been spirit activity, hence the exorcisms. All of a sudden, the room goes pitch black. A giant black mass rises up from the opposite end of the table, went right down the table and hit me in the chest. And at that point, I freaked the heck out. I got outside. I instantly grounded myself and did not walk back into the location. Those are the only 2 times that I've been freaked out to the point where it's like, there are things that we're dealing with that sometimes we have no control over whatsoever.
That's true. And sometimes those things rear up just to point that right out to you, too.
Yes, they do.
So that is so bizarre. I would have not gone back in. At least you knew to ground.
Yeah, I learned that a long time ago. It's for me, it's getting right down in the earth or next to a tree, and that really helps.
Yes, I like to be barefoot and next to a tree, but there are times that barefoot is not really a good option. So I appreciate you sharing that because I had no idea. And I probably would not have thought, about being a white man at the head of that table. And
that's me looking back on it. That's the narrative that I'm assigning to it, because I think that was what the trigger was, but I can't say to be certain.
Well, it would be logical, right?
Yeah.
I mean, genuinely logical. So I have to tell you, I would have been tripping too in both of those scenarios. But, I have had something come home with me, and it is not easy. I actually, the first time it was like it was stuck to me, like stuck to my aura or whatever. And I felt it. And when I got home, I called a friend who is a really strong psychic, but she's also a shaman. And I said, look, this happened, and I feel very odd. I think there is something. It felt like a prickly pear on my elbow. And she said, well, let me look at you. So I just, sat still and didn't do much. She said, okay, yeah, well, I can't move that. You're going to have to heal that. And this is how you do it. And she said, and do not investigate until this is healed, because you can't shield with this. So that was an eye-opener, and I was very much more cautious about who I investigated with and how I investigated from that point on, because it happened. Oh dear, there went all kinds of equipment. But I apologize. But the actual thing was that someone was doing Reiki who was not great at it, right? And instead of slinging to the ground, they were just slinging their hands. And I had my back turned, and I felt something smack me on the elbow. And it was quite alarming, because I knew I was in trouble because I couldn't get a shield under it. So it's bizarre what will happen when you are just out there doing things and kind of minding your own business, you think. But you just let your guard down for a moment.
Sometimes that's all it takes. And to a point with Reiki, that is one of the craziest things out there, because you've got people learning remote Reiki from somebody online or via phone call, and they're turning around and teaching people in the same manner over and over and over, and things just get lost in translation. So I'm always very wary of Reiki practitioners for that reason.
Yes. Well, I am actually in a course of study right now, and I'm looking forward to it because it's a Reiki Master class, and I'm very pleased about that. Oh, April said one time she woke up to something moving her dowsing rods. Hello, just wanted to visit with you for a while. She said it startled her, I would think. Well, we are out of time, and I have got your websites in both chat rooms. I have got your websites on the show banner information. But one more time, it's paranormalstudy.com and ITCvoices.org. Or just, plain old you. Nothing plain about you, my friend. But timwoolworth.com. So you can find him any number of ways. He is also all over Facebook. Thank you so much for just a wonderful show. And the chat is saying that also. I have enjoyed this so much.
It was a lot of fun, and it was a lot of side roads to go down, which is always thrilling for me. Your chat audience asked some great questions, so thank you guys.
Well, they're good. I keep telling them they need their own shows, but they won't do it. But thank you, and for everyone listening, whether you're live or via the archives, thank you so much, because without you, we would just be talking to ourselves, right? And I love having a chance to talk with y'all. Now, we have got a big first week of the year coming up, and I am going to be hosting Mike Ricksecker with May Hernan, and we're going to be talking about, haunted media and stuff, but we're also going to be talking about Mike's trip that he is going to be the ambassador for to Wales. I would love to go to Wales, but I can't go on every trip. And Andrea Perrin has one going to England, and I'm already booked on Rick McCallum's. Oh my gosh, there's just so much to do. I'm going to have to get a job. But I am so excited to welcome. I've never talked to Mike Ricksecker. I've heard him speak. So this is going to be fun. And then I will be followed, of course, by Teal. And then we'll have the Full Spectrum Project on Thursday night. And they're going to have Lloyd Auerbach, who I absolutely adore. Going to be a great show. And I am not sure what I'm going to do for Shelley's and for Denise's replays, but they're both going to be out of pocket. We'll see. Thank you again for being here, Tim. I appreciate you so much. And I just cannot believe how much you blew my mind through this whole show, especially on the technicians. I appreciate that.
You're very welcome.
All right. So good night, everybody. And just remember, You are the change you want to be in this world. You can make it so. You can manifest what you want to see. You can just do it by your actions. You can be the friend you want to have or the spouse you want to have. I don't always live up to my spouse. I have a wonderful husband. But it's all about your intention. If something is upsetting you, just find a way to make it tolerable. Change the situation. Change your reaction to the situation. We can do this. We have been through so much awfulness, and it looks like there's a little bit more. So just be the person you want to see. And I'm going to do that too. And we'll just change the world. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you everyone for listening, and we will see you on the flip side.